Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the next session of our Get Certified DP-600 series. My name is Anna. I'll be your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our moderators to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our speakers for today. Javier, Martin, thank you so much for joining.
Hello. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be here today. How are you, Martin? How are you doing?
I am great, Javier. I am great, going good. Hopefully you are yourself. It's great weather here in Brisbane, Australia, and I presume you're still in Argentina.
It's nice. Here it's nice. So, we are ending the summer. So, what do you think about our session today? Real-time intelligence, fabric security, and administration. Don't you think there's a ton of context to move on?
There is a ton. We're going to jump around real-time, fabric security, and obviously the admin. There's a ton of stuff just in admin. So let's get into it and see how we go, Javier.
Let's do it. So before we start, quickly, we have some introduction for the one who doesn't know me. My name is Javier Villegas. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I work as IT director at Mediterranean Shipping Company. I'm Microsoft MVP in the Data Platform Award category, and I'm also Microsoft Certified Trainer. You have the QR code over there in where you can connect with me through LinkedIn to my social network. So please reach out to me. I'm one of the local organizers here in Argentina of our local community, SQL Argentina. So feel free to connect with us. Martin.
Thanks a lot, Javier. And you'll probably see Javier on the Spanish channel and Portuguese channel as well. Gets around a bit.
Only Spanish for now. Only Spanish.
Oh, is that right? Sorry. Okay, so I'm Marty Catherall. I've been a data platform MVP for quite a long time, maybe about 12 years or so. Started in the SQL world, morphed into Azure, and now I've morphed again into Fabric. So my website and socials are down there. Feel free to reach out. But Javier, let's have a look at our moderators. So today we've definitely got Chris Hyde. He's over in America. He'll be doing some moderating too. We've got Deepti. She'll be answering questions in there. And we've got Greg Lowe, who might pop in from time to time. Greg's pretty much an expert on real time. So get your questions in there if he's there. If he's not, I'm sure Chris and DP will be on the ball to answer those questions. What else have we got, Javier?
Great moderators today, so please take advantage of them. Drop your questions in the chat. And today we are concluding another series, right? The DP-600. This was a series of episodes that today we are finishing with this one, a real-time intelligence, fabric security, and administration. You have the QR code there and the link if you want to go reach the recording and everything that we've been through since beginning of February. Feel free to do it. I mean, ton of content. And if you are planning to take the DP-600 exam, you better go and check those recordings. So, as we say, ton of things, a lot of things happening. Fabric Data Days, now we have a monthly event, right, in where some of the community members here will be sharing with us a good session about a specific topic, of course, related to Fabric. On March 26th, we're going to have a new one. We still don't have the topic, right? It will be announced soon. You have the QR code and the link there to get all the news.
Hey, Javier,
yeah,
great call out about those QR codes. I'll take you through to the recorded session. I just wanted to call out that obviously this is live. So if you're on the live chat, you've got the opportunity to ask questions. Take advantage of that. Tell us where you're from. We'd love to hear. And great stuff, Javier.
Yeah, absolutely. Make it interactive. That's the goal. So you can join the Fabric user panel in where you're going to be able to interact with community member, with expert. So definitely this is the place to go, right? Again, QR code link on the screen. There are also instructor-led hands-on workshop, right? You remember, Martin, the old dashboard in a day. Well, now we have the evolution, which is Fabric Analyst in a day, right?
Great stuff.
Awesome. I've done both of them, the dashboard in a day and the Fabric Analyst in a day. And, those are really good because are instructor-led, right? And a lot of hands-on. So you're going to be doing labs, etc. So if you want to get your hands dirty, again, this is the place to go.
And good to
and of
call
course,
out,
Martin,
yeah, good to
as
call
usual,
out those workshops. Yeah. There are obviously a lot of them are online, but you can find in-person ones close to you. I've taught a few in-person ones, and I think the in-person ones are really good if you can get along to them. But if you can't, the online ones are just as good.
And of course, Martin, as usual, we have vouchers for certification, right? So if you're planning to take the DP-600 or DP-700 certification, we have the vouchers, right? So as soon as this session is over, go check the QR code, go to the link on the screen, right? And fill up the form to get the voucher. Remember, the offer ends at the end of February 28th, right? So hurry up and do it. And Martin, what's next? Fabric Conference, the FabCon, an awesome event coming in Atlanta, Georgia this year, which is co-located with SQLCon, which I have the honor that to speak in the SQLCon this year. So I will be delivering a session. So a lot of things happening over there. What do you think, Martin?
I think excellent, Javier. So we're in Atlanta this year. I'll be there presenting. I'm presenting with my good friend Heidi Hastings. I'll see you there. But new location, yeah. I've been over the last 2 years. That's been in Las Vegas. And I'm really looking forward to going to Atlanta and hopefully seeing a lot of our audience there.
Looking forward for that, Martin.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we start with the content? As we said, a lot of things happening ahead. So Martin, guide us.
Okay. Well, let's get into getting started with real-time intelligence in Microsoft Fabric. And real-time, probably quite new to a lot of people. Traditionally, I'd say the main way of ingesting data was through batch data. But Fabric actually makes this quite straightforward and quite simple. There's probably a few nuances in here, a few analogies we can make with the real-time data. But they, there's a wealth of things you can do, a wealth of sources that you can connect to and ingest data into, and then you can run analytic queries over the data you ingest in real time as well. You can import data from a variety of sources. So as you see on the screen, we pretty much got the entire ecosystem of real time. We've got event streams over to the left-hand side. Always get my left and my right mixed up there, Javier. Now, the event streams are how the data is going to be ingested. More on them in a minute. But as the data is ingested, it can go to this thing called Reflex, which is a way of querying the real-time data and also setting alerts up. And that data ultimately ends up in an event house, which I'll talk more about right now. So, ingesting data. Most people are probably familiar with batch data where, we've got maybe a copy activity and we're reaching out to the data and pulling it in and we're sending it off to somewhere else. So we do that on a schedule in real time, where we're getting the data, pulling it in, sending it off somewhere else, and then once it's in the database and hardening the database, then we might do some analytics on it. We might put it through our bronze or silver or gold layers, do whatever we like to it. Okay, so there is an analogy there. So if you think of the event stream, which is how the data will be ingested. But the event stream is not reaching out and pulling the data in. It's sitting there waiting for the data to be fired at it, almost like, waiting for data to come in and ingesting it as it comes in. So it might come in all together. It might come in bit by bit. It might come in periodically. But the event stream is basically just sitting there waiting for the data to be thrown at it. Now, once it's ingested, what does it do with it then? Well, it's got a couple of choices of things it can do with it. It can throw it to our Reflex that we just talked about slightly, where we'll be querying the data. And if maybe there's an alert, maybe it reaches a threshold, we can fire off an alert. Maybe that could be through Power Automate. Maybe it could be through Teams. Maybe we could send an email. There's a variety of ways that we can alert. And actually, Power Automate combined with this gives us a lot of choices on places where we can send that alert to. Javier, have you ever used this?
Yes, and I love it. Believe me, I'm coming more from the batch processing side of the world, but now I'm getting into the real-time intelligent with those events just consuming from Azure Service Bus, from Kafka, also from change feed in SQL, right? And being able to take decisions using Reflex, for example, on real-time data opens a ton of scenarios for us to do analytics in real time. So definitely, I love it.
Great stuff, Javier. And you bring up a really interesting point there. So most people think about real-time data as being, you've got to have something like, an electricity feed or a utility feed throwing data at you constantly. But you can also use this for event-based data. So for example, Javier used the example of change data capture and change feeds where an event might happen and that will fire data into the event stream. Events in, say, OneLake or Azure Storage could be used to fire off events and ingest them with the event stream. So it's not just about, I'd say, traditional real-time data. It's also about event handling as well. And you might have used things in SQL Server to handle events like Service Broker. Very similar kind of mechanism, and there's definitely analogies there. So they're the two components at the top: ingesting data and alerting. So we talked about querying the data to alert. How would we query the data? Well, we would use KQL, Kusto Query Language. Now, you've probably heard this is kind of like SQL. And there's lots of people that say, languages that are used to query rows and columns, which obviously SQL does, are very similar. And that's kind of true up to a point. So if you're familiar with SQL, you probably have no problem adapting to KQL. But as you get more advanced into it, you'll be able to do things in Kusto that you can't do very easily in SQL. Things like binning data, looking at time windows. You've got these things called sliding windows and hopping windows where in data that's ingested will overlap through time phases and all that sort of thing. And Javier, can we just hop back to the slide a minute? I just want to talk about the event house. So the event house is actually a container. A container is quite an overloaded word in IT in general. So the event house itself houses KQL databases. And we can house multiple KQL databases. So don't get confused that an event house is actually the same as the KQL database. You see lots of documentation that kind of gives the impression that they're one and the same thing. And that's probably a lot of times that one event house hosts one KQL database. So, if you're sending it to that KQL database, you're sending it to the event house. But just think of the event house as a container and think of the KQL database as residing inside the event house. So let's talk more about KQL. So discover patterns. So if you use things like log analytics in Azure, might be familiar with querying that data feed to discover patterns in data when things fall outside of a given range, identify anomalies and outliers. Creating statistical models is a really good thing that you can do too. Lots of things. It is case sensitive. Yeah, be aware that there are a few differences here between SQL and KQL. So KQL is case sensitive for everything. So table names, column names, operator functions. I don't know if that's through you in the past, Javier.
Yes. I'm also new to KQL, right? But as you said, it has some similarity with T-SQL. As soon as you get the core statement, you can do a bunch of things. It's super powerful. The good part is that allow you to query millions of events real quick. So definitely, when you use real time, KQL is the way to go.
Yeah. And it's actually used in a lot of different Microsoft products. We mentioned Azure Log Analytics, Azure Monitor, also in Microsoft Sentinel, Azure Data Explorer, which are kind of the forerunner in Synapse to real-time analytics in Fabric. And obviously, what we're talking about today, real-time analytics. But let's talk a bit more about Kusto and go to the next slide where we've got KQL in Microsoft Fabric. Now, we have these things called KQL Query Sets. So what is a query set? Well, as the name suggests, it's a set of queries. So you might break your queries up to look at different things, and those things might be related, and you might put those set of scripts together in a query set. So that's the query set. There's certain advantages over T-SQL. Obviously, KQL has got some advantages. It's actually built from the ground up to query real-time data, whereas T-SQL is mostly used to query, like static data in the database. KQL is good for building those real-time models, whereas T-SQL obviously does the static stuff. Have you seen any differences that you want to point out, Javier, or have I summed it up pretty well there?
I mean, it's when you deal with events, as you say, in SQL Server, maybe you have insertion of new data as it comes, and you do the select and you fetch the data right away, right? But when you start working with events, you have to make sure that you switch your brain that this is not a row in a table, right? This is an event coming from a sensor, from a change feed, or anything, and you will notice that with KQL you are able to handle it, very quickly, and it's a familiar language, or at least a familiar syntax for you to use it.
That's right, Javier. And I think on the next slide we've got an example of a KQL query itself. So the very at the top where we just got storm events, that would be a table, and we just basically list a table. There's no writing select star from or whatever, and we just list the table. And then we basically use a pipe. So you can see in the rest of the commands there's a pipe and there's other syntax after it to pipe that result set to the next command. So the second one we've got in there, storm events, is being piped to the count command. So we're counting the rows in the storm events table, a bit like doing, select count star from storm events. The next one, we're actually piping the storm events to a take 5. So we're saying take the top 5. In SQL, that would be like select top 5 from storm events. And we can keep on building the query with those pipes, one after the other. So as you get more familiar with KQL, you'll notice there's probably a decent order that you maybe you'd say want to do your where clause before your group by, or follow it in a logical pattern so you're not repeating the same thing time after time. The bottom query there on the left hand side, we've got project state event type damage property. That's basically selecting the columns that we want to show from the storm events table. And over on the right hand side, we've got some more intricate queries where we've got a where clause and we're joining where clauses together. We're projecting once again. We're looking at basically different things, different filters going on. So there is definitely an analogy with SQL there. And in fact, Javier, I don't know if you know this, but you can actually write some T-SQL and have the real-time analytics engine transform that to KQL for you.
Yeah. That is harmful, but in my personal experience, just knowing KQL from scratch, not trying to think as a SQL developer, let's say, it's way more useful, at least to me. And let me tell you something, Martin. Copilot is your friend, right? When you need to learn about how to write a specific query, try to forget a little bit about T-SQL and focus on KQL. And with Copilot, definitely you will do it right away.
Good stuff, Javier. Good stuff. So yeah, the next slide has got some more KQL syntax on there, and it obviously makes the point that I previously made about piping the correct commands together, and making sure certain commands come before others to reduce the amount of data you've got. And a few other considerations there to take into account. So let's talk about query sets on the next slide. Like I say, the query sets basically a set of queries that might be related to one another, and you might put maybe a group of queries together because you might have something. You can do real-time dashboarding in real-time analytics. That's distinct from Power BI. So you might have a group of real-time dashboards, and they all run via slightly different queries. So you might want to put those query sets together and put them in one group that do very, very similar things. Okay, so let's have a look at some data that I think we've got to display there, Javier. But before we talk about that, I just wanted to mention something that Javier said about when I made the point that you can get the engine to write SQL as KQL. Now, I think that's really useful, but Javier made a great point about learning things from first principles and learning from the ground up. I like doing that myself as well. So I'd say once you've got started with the transformation going from SQL to KQL, learn it from first principles, get to know it, learning a language like that will give you a lot of power in the future. But in front of us now, we see a KQL query up the top, and we can see the display that's being put out on a real-time dashboard underneath. So there we have our KQL query. So let's round this out, Javier, by talking about what's on the next slide, which is copying and sharing data. So we can copy queries pretty easily from duplicating the query and altering it because it's maybe slightly different. And there's a variety of things that we can do there. But Javier, I would love to talk about this for a long time, but I think it's probably about time we skipped on to our next section, which is securing data in Microsoft Fabric. So I'll hand over to you, mate, because I know you're pretty much the expert here.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Let's try to move on here with security, right? So we know that data access in organization is governed by user roles, responsibilities, deployment patterns, and data architecture, right? In Microsoft Fabric, it's quite proven, right, that it's flexible and it's multi-layer security model that supports the principle of least privilege. This is super important because, most of us are coming from the SQL world, and some of us, like me, are coming from many, many years ago in where security was not a big deal, right? Now it is. So the principle of least privilege is something that we need to stick in mind, right? So do not grant additional permission or something that the users won't need, right? Let's start small, and then eventually the user will come and ask, right? Whether they need more permissions or not, right? There are 3 levels of security in Microsoft Fabric that go sequentially, one after the other, right? The first one is Microsoft Entra ID authentication, in where it's gonna verify the user's identity, right? Once you are there, you go to the second layer, which is Fabric access, which will determine whether the user can access Fabric or any items within Fabric. And finally, data security, right? That will check whether the user can perform a specific action on a table or in a file, right? So this is super important to start with security.
So Javier, so it's like an onion, is it? We've got various layers surrounding the data. I like that.
Yeah. And we go one after the other, right? So this is super cool. So in the third security level that we just mentioned, which is data security, right? We can configure and build blocks that can be applied individually or all together to meet the requirement of the user to have access to, right? And as you know, we have multiple components in Fabric. We have the workspace, and there are roles for the workspaces, right? We're gonna go into that in a minute. Then within the workspace, right, we have items, and there's gonna be permissions for those items. Then we can go a little bit more granular and assign permissions to what is compute or the engine, right? And finally, OneLake data access control, which as for today is still in preview, right? So here is the hierarchy that we're gonna be working with in terms of permission. First of all, workspace, that will define the ownership and the broad access through the workspace role, right? We're gonna check which are those roles later on. But then within the workspace, if we go to the items, and the items are, for example, the layout, the warehouse, the semantic model, the data flows, the pipeline, etc. Those items, right, will inherit the permission, right, that are coming from the workspace. Then we go more granular, and we can assign access like read data, or deny eventually, right? And finally, when we reach the storage layer, right, we have the OneLake data access security control, right? That we can go and assign permission very deeply to a folder, to a file, to a table. Martin, have you experience working with security or dealing with security, I should say, in Fabric?
Yeah. I think whatever you do in IT, and obviously we deal with data, security should be at the front and center of everyone's mind. Whatever your role is, whether you're ingesting data or modeling data or visualizing data that we're talking about here, every layer of the life cycle, you should be thinking about security. and obviously raising a concern with the rest of your team if you see any gaps in there. And Javier, you made a great point about the principle of least privilege. As consultants, I mean, we are consultants. I always find it good to have the level of access that I need to do my job, but not too much access, because, well, I can make mistakes, and I don't want to be dropping people's databases.
Absolutely. Imagine that, Martin.
Yeah. Well, it does happen. It does happen.
Yeah, it does. And believe me, I've seen it, and I'm pretty sure that you too.
Yeah, and that's why you back things up.
So when we go a step further and we try to understand the workspaces role, remember the workspace are this logic grouping of items that we have. There are 4 predefined roles, right? Admin, which has full control and is able to manage the permission as well. So it's the one that will also be able to have full control by creating items, for example, but it's also the one who will grant permission to others, right? The other predefined role is member, right? That can view, modify, and share the content within the workspace. The other predefined role is contributor, right? That can view, right, or read, as we said, and modify the content of that specific item, right? And finally, we have viewer. As the name implies, it can only view those items, right? Any comments here, Martin?
Well, I think this is easy enough to remember. The way I remember is obviously admin, easy to remember on the right-hand side, the least restrictive. Viewer.
That's the one that users comes to us asking for, right?
That's the one. We got viewer over on the right-hand side, which is the least restrictive. Obviously, people just need that to look at the reports. There's no point writing reports if people can't view them. But the mistake I used to make, I used to think contributor come before member, because it does in Azure. But remember, so it goes admin, member, contributor, viewer. So contributor comes before viewer, not right after admin. So that's just something that I struggle with a bit, but now I've got it in my head. I can remember it pretty easily. So hopefully that has helped some people.
I'm still struggling because, I'm coming from the Azure world in where, as you just said, it was the other way around. So contributor was right after admin, but now in Fabric is this way.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, if you're a bit unsure, if you've got a doubt in your mind, go to the docs, look it up. I think there's a really good table somewhere in Learn that points out all the differences and the commonality between all of those roles, Javier.
So then, Martin, we have Workspace Access, which is managed through the Manage Access option, where you can add or remove users to these predefined roles, right? If a user responsibility change, their broad workspace role can be removed or added by replacing by a more restrictive item level permission. For example, a data engineer who no longer need full contributor access can have a permission only to a specific layout, right? For example, the one they are working with, and limit the access just to see the metadata and the data, right? This approach always, as we said at the beginning, support the principle of least privilege, right? That ensure that the users only can have access to what they need and anything else, right? The items permissions, so remember, within the workspace, we have the items, layhouses, warehouses, etc. The permission can be configured by selecting or clicking on the ellipses, right, on each of the items, right, and then choose Manage Permission, right, and that will allow you to go more granular and assign the other one that we're going to be talking in this next slide, right? So when a workspace role or a workspace where a workspace role or item permission is not enough for you, and you need to go more granular, such as, for example, have access to a specific table or even a row within the table, or if you are working with a lakehouse and a specific folder or file, right? You can secure it and configure it with a SQL analytic endpoint, OneLake data access role, as we said. Remember, still in preview, unfortunately, but I believe that soon the OneLake data security roles will be GA, right? Also, warehouse and semantic models. So if we have this need to go in deep, right, and go within the items to a specific role, then later we will see another security mechanism, right? But if you really go and need to do it manually and deeply, you have all the options. This is like SQL, Martin, right? You go and grant the permission on a table, on a view, right? So you can really be super granular. Have you ever had to deal with these item permissions within a lakehouse or data warehouse?
I have indeed, and I love that analogy, because I think a lot of people are maybe coming to Fabric, and the analogy with SQL is a good one, where you might get access to the database. Once you've got access to the database, you might need access to tables. You might not need access to certain rows within tables, so you can put item permissions on the rows, and you could do things like row level security, like you said, item level security, and rows. Like, if you're a nurse in a hospital, you might only want to see the rows that relate to your patients. So I can see my patients, but I can't see your patients, Javier. And very similar in Fabric.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we just said, right, we need to go beyond the workspace security or at item level security. We can use T-SQL through the SQL analytic endpoint, right, and apply more granular security in, for example, the lakehouse, right? We can use data control language commands like grant, deny, revoke, right? And we can assign or revoke access to specific items, right? Additionally, for deeper control, right, as in SQL, right, we have the possibility to have column level security, right, and restrict, for example, the data that is in a specific column. We have row level security, in where eventually we can limit the amount of rows that user will be able to consume based on a pattern. For example, all the customers, or let's say, if you are in a hospital, right, all the person that are within the hospital, right, the patient will be, one doctor will have assigned 10 of them. Another doctor maybe will have another 15, right? So with row level security, we can easily create a rule for that doctor to access the whole table, but it only will limit to their patients, right? So even if the doctor does select star from the table, he only gonna retrieve the data from their patients, not the other ones, right? This is super cool. And of course, this is also available in SQL Server. And finally, dynamic data masking, right? If eventually you have to mask some sensitive data to the users, right, there are several mechanisms that allow you to mask or obfuscate the data. So you can, in this example, for example, if you have a social security number, you can just hide the values and put some random number, or just replace it by X's, right, or any other character that you would like to.
Yeah, that's right, Javier. And I love the way there are like masks already created for us that we can use, like to mask a phone number or to mask a credit card. But as well as that, you've got the power to write your own mask. You also got the power to write your own
custom rules. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of flexibility there to meet your own security requirements.
Yeah. So going a step further, right? For example, if we want to deal with OneLake data access role to secure the data in, for example, within the lakehouse, we go to the lake view, right? Which is used to read data and store in the folder. Remember that lakehouses is mainly to work with tables, so relational data, right? And also files. For example, JSON, CSV, Parquet file. So we can call it non-relational or with no schema or with flexible schema, right? So we have the possibility to work with that. So while we work on a workspace, right, on an item permission that provide broad access control, more granular security can be applied to the folder level using OneLake data access role, right? These roles are, for example, create a custom role within a lakehouse, grant read access to a specific folder only, right? Again, one user will be able to see the files on that specific folder, nothing else. We can also apply permission that automatically be inherited to the subfolder, right? Like in a regular folder structure, you can, grant the proper data access to the root folder and then inherit all the permission to the subfolders or not, right? Depending on your need, right? You can also configure OneLake data access role by selecting Manage OneLake data access in the lake view, right? You can also create a new role, for example, and choose the folders to grant access to, right? So eventually you have that need. You can also assign users or group to a specific roles and define the permission. So as you can see, you can go very granular and start doing your fine-grained permission at folder level, subfolder level, even at the single file level. So it's super powerful. There are a lot of security granularity in Fabric. So definitely something that you will run into every single day if you are working with Fabric. What do you think, Martin?
I think you've done a great job of explaining a very complicated topic, Javier. I'm glad you decided to do that rather than me. You've done an excellent job. So basically, to sum up, tell me if I've summed up this right. We're basically going through layers of security. We're getting gradually more granular. And as we get to the more granular layers, we can write our own functions to mask data or do row level security. But ultimately, we want to make sure our data is secure. And I think you've summed it up pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the security area, I will say that there's more to come in Fabric, right? Definitely it's quite solid as for today, but the OneLake security definitely will keep surprising us with the granularity and the level of permission that we're going to be able to grant. Because as we seen, Martin, every single week we have a ton of new features in Fabric. So definitely permission is something that has to be at the top of mind, right? So
yeah, that's right. And security is one of those things that's never really finished. It's never really complete. It's very, very complete and very, very solid, but it's always being looked at and added to and monitored and all that sort of thing. But talking of things coming in Fabric every week, I believe we're going to get onto the admin section, are we?
Yeah, you just said we're going to wrap up this part. Well, we still have a lot of content to share, but we're going to go to the administer Microsoft Fabric area, which is quite intense, let's say. right?
It is,
So-
Javier. I've noticed that there's features coming in here all the time. Like as the preview features come in, you mentioned some preview features previously. You can turn them off or turn them off here. You can configure access to Fabric for the organization. There's a whole lot of things that go on in here. And yeah, you've got to be a real expert to remember all of this, I think.
I always show with friends and colleagues, because, you know, when you go and check which are the roles that you may have in Fabric, right? Oh, data engineer, data warehouse developer, real-time analytic developer or engineer, but you forget the administrator, right? Because someone needs to administer all this, right? So do this exercise, ask, and they will probably go to the user level, but definitely someone needs to be behind the curtain, behind the scene, supporting all this monster, right? And well, as we know, Microsoft Fabric is this all-in-one software as a service analytic platform that unifies data movement, engineering, integration, data science, real-time analytics, and business intelligence in a single integrated environment. And as I said, also the administration, right? This is not super new. I mean, it's Fabric, it has around 2 years, right?
It's built on existing principles, and it follows all that stuff, all that good stuff, all that best practice stuff. So you can draw lots of analogies with things that have gone before, Azure, Entra, all that sort of thing. Yeah,
basically it combines capabilities that we used to see in the past all together within the same environment, right? Azure Synapse Analytics for data storage and manipulation, Azure Data Factory for ingestion, and of course, Power BI, right? All this is in the market and still there, right? And you can go and buy it through the Azure portal if you have to, right? But if you need to create an end-to-end analytic project, right, that will involve Data Factory for integration, Synapse for storage and manipulation, and Power BI for the reports and the dashboard, right? First of all, it's super complex to wire all those components, right? In terms of networking, in terms of if you work in a big enterprise, you need to generate all the access for all of this, because there are different products and services, right? You go through the Azure portal and you go provision Synapse, then you provision Azure Data Factory, and finally Power BI, which has its own licensing, right? So licensing, another important thing and quite hard to handle. Within Fabric, what Microsoft did is combine all these components within a single platform, right? Software as a service, in this case, empower it a lot, right? And solve all that interconnectivity within all these components, right? So now you don't have to just go provision Data Factory, create your pipeline, and pay for that pipeline every time you execute it. So at the end of the month, the billing process is also complex, because you have to pay for one thing, the other, the usage, etc. Now, Fabric has removed all that complexity, right? So this enables the organization to unify their data state, leveraging AI, because, on every single component in Fabric, you are able to use Copilot, right? You can empower user across the business, drive insight directly within Microsoft 365 apps, like, for example, Excel on Teams, right? And you can help your teams to innovate and deliver data solutions faster, right? Any comments here, Martin?
No, I think you've summed that up good. I think on the next slide, we could see the architecture of Fabric, basically, and the components that we've got in the ecosystem. I think at this point, well, hopefully at this point, people are familiar with these, that you've gone over them. Ingestion with Data Factory, data engineering to model, data science to predict, things like that. And I think you summed that up really nicely, Javier.
Yeah, what I like to describe this is that within the same solution, you can wear different hats, right? You can be the data integrator and use pipelines or data flow tool, right?
Yeah.
You can be.
Yeah. And you talked about like on the security, layers of onions. So on the next slide, we can see layers of onions for the administration settings. So tenant, capacity, domain, workspace, items. I guess there's an analogy there.
Yeah, I mean, the tenant is the big thing. So these are the main components in Fabric, right? Tenant, right? Then we have capacity that represent the compute, right? And is what we're gonna be buying, right? Then underneath, we can divide into domains, which are logical groupings of workspaces. For example, you have your sales, your marketing or finance area, and you can organize the access and the management. Then underneath, we have a workspace. We have been speaking about the workspace extensively. And also underneath, we have Fabric items, such as warehouse, lakehouse, etc. Right? So this is the hierarchy within the Fabric. And remember, at the top is tenant and capacity until your items, right? So which are the admin tasks or responsibilities that we may have, right? As we said before, secure and access control, right? With role-based access control, Azure Active Directory, data gateway, and control the access and protect sensitive data. This is one of the tasks of a Fabric administrator. Data governance, right? Which secure the connectivity, monitor the usage and performance, right? And enforce governance policies to ensure the proper data access. That is another important admin task. Yeah. Customization and configuration, right? That will help us to configure private link, data classification, policies, and tailor the platform to the organizational need. And finally, monitoring and optimization, right? So we can easily track performance, manage the capacity, optimize queries, configure alerts, and do any kind of troubleshooting. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Those and that monitoring and optimization is often overlooked by people. People don't start optimizing until there's a problem. But if they'd have monitored, then they could have optimized far sooner and there wouldn't be a problem. So that's probably a good tenet to remember.
Yeah. So here are some tips on Fabric admin tools that we can use to effectively manage Microsoft Fabric, right? So we can have the Fabric admin portal, PowerShell commandlets, admin APIs and SDKs, and the admin monitoring workspace. There is a specific workspace for administration, right? And also the capacity monitoring app that will help us to keep track on the usage, right? On the compute usage, the storage consumption, the billing information, etc. So if you're gonna be doing the administration part in Fabric, make sure that you know these tools, right? So within the Fabric admin portal, which is a web-based tool and is used to centrally manage the tenant and the capacity settings across the whole platform. All of us, or the ones who will administer Fabric, can manage users and groups, review the audit logs, monitor the usage and performance, and configure the key features in Fabric. Remember, there are a lot of settings to configure, right? The defaults are quite good, but eventually if you want to start playing around with preview features, you have to go and enable something through the admin portal. If you want to enlarge your security, your semantic models, for example, you may have to go there and enable it from here, and many others, right? So even for non-admin users, should be able to understand what can be controlled through this portal, right? It's important that everybody have some sort of knowledge of what is within the admin portal. Besides the administrator that, of course, should know everything from A to Z, right? We can also, manage the licensing here, right? And assign for example, the Fabric admin role, right? And we can go there if we want to go granular in terms of features. We can switch on and off certain features from the admin portal, right? There is also the admin workspace monitoring usage, right? It's important.
Workspaces at Javier.
Second,
is this a separate workspace that monitors your usage of other workspaces?
Yes. And it's quite useful because, depending on how you decide to handle your projects within your Fabric capacity, let's say that you use the medallion architecture, bronze, silver, and gold, and you have one workspace for each of them. Within this Fabric admin monitoring workspace, you can monitor everything: the capacity, the workspace, the items, the activities, and even the users, right? So you can go very deep, and eventually, if you have a specific workspace that is consuming a lot of resources, a big chunk of your CU, your capacity unit, right? You can easily identify it from here and take all the necessary actions right away. Mm-hmm.
Great stuff. And this shows us the capacity monitor metrics app, does it?
Yeah, this is an app, right, which is called Capacity Metric app, which you can install and access the Microsoft Capacity Metric. And, if you need to collaborate with other admins and get every single insight of your capacity, right? Remember when we spoke about the different layers, right? There is this app that will help us to keep track of your capacity. And believe me, if you need to do troubleshooting on performance, if you need to keep track of one specific user, what is doing, if you need to go check for a specific log, or if you have doubt that maybe you are running out of compute power and you may need to scale up, this is definitely the way to start with, right? These tools, right?
Here's my onion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we mentioned, security is built in on Power BI security as well. And if you are admin, you are responsible of managing users, group, and how the content is shared and distributed across the environment, right? There are some key security features in Microsoft Fabric, which are conditional access, resiliencies, lockbox, service tags, and OneLake security, as we just mentioned, right? And then we have the licensing part, which, of course, Martin, is a big deal, right?
It is a big deal. And we probably don't have enough time to talk about it in the 2 minutes we've got left, Javier, but you have mentioned it previously, and you've done a pretty good job there. Governance.
Let's wrap up.
Yep, let's wrap, mate. So there are resources around to help you prepare for the exam, but please, Javier's got the QR codes on the screen where you can get the prep checklist, and you can see some on-demand sessions. So I guess it's just good for us to say, is it, Javier, remind people what's coming up. Again, there's a QR code there, which you can obviously join the Fabric user panel, give the product group your feedback on maybe new features or existing features that are coming out.
And we will thank our moderators because they have done an amazing job. I've been checking the chat here. It's super hot, so interactive, so I love it. Martin, we have reached the end on time, right? So good job. Love to share this session with you. This is, I believe, our third time together. So definitely it's a pleasure to me to be here, and especially with you. So thank you. And thanks to all the people who attend to our session today.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Javier. Great to moderate with you. Sorry, great to present with you, but I've also moderated with you. Thanks to our moderators. Great people there. And have fun. Play with Microsoft Fabric. And me and Javier will see you next time.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.